Okay, I'm going to confine my remarks tonight to, it'll be Urbandale in World War II and the things that took place. Virginia has a little additional information here that we just came up with tonight that I didn't know existed, and it's going to be very helpful to get that into our files, not only here, but at the Legion Hall. I'm getting ready to give a talk about the history of Urbandale at the Legion Hall on the 16th, and we found out that they have some wonderful history in their records that we don't have here in the house. And jointly, we have some things that they are going to be surprised that when they find out we've got them, they're going to get a surprise tonight when I talk on the 16th. I wanted to start out with asking, is there here that was living on the 7th of December, 41? Okay, quite a few of you. Do you remember where you were that day? Anything about the day?
That's too little.
I wondered. I do, Verda does. Verda, tell me how you found out about the attack. Could you recall?
Probably over the radio.
You don't really recall for sure.
No, I don't.
Well, I remember it very vividly because I was 11 years old. It was a warm Sunday. And it happened that our country church out west of Hancock, Iowa was having a 50th anniversary celebration on December 7th. The bishop was coming from Kansas City to speak. Now, small country churches don't get a bishop once in a lifetime. And the bishop came and spoke that morning, and we had lunch at noon, and right after lunch came the message that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. Now, I don't recall much after that, but of course, there was just people asking, where is Pearl Harbor? No one really knew, and they said a lot of people looking at the atlas, where is it? But I do know that immediately after that, there were people lining up to enlist, and we had prior to that, the soldiers in the Army, what we called the Ohio troops, were over the hill in Ohio. And Roosevelt had arranged to extend their terms a little longer for a year. And these fellows who thought they were going to get out in October became the over the hill in October guys, because they're really burning because they got a little more time added to their enlistment. And actually a few of them did desert. But my boss said that he was enlisted at that time and was in the Army on the East Coast. And some of these men who were the Ohio troops were due to get out that Sunday. They were going to lunch, and after lunch they were going to pick up their discharge papers and on their way home, and they went to lunch, and they're frozen in the Army and were there then for another 4 years.
Oh.
But Roosevelt was concerned about what our Army was just going to almost fade away that summer before under the present laws that they had, and we just wouldn't have had any Army, but he had gotten Congress to allow them him to hold them a little longer, and he held them long enough that they came the attack on Pearl Harbor. Also, I have, and I don't have them with me tonight, some checks that were interesting, and two of them were written by a great uncle of mine. Everybody wanted to do something. And the farmers in Pottawatomie County decided they wanted to buy a bomber. And I have a copy of the check that he wrote to the President of the United States for $25. It says Bomber Fund.
Oh.
Now, I don't know how much money they got or what a bomber cost, but I have that check that he had written. And immediately, there was concern, of course, about the Japanese taking Hawaii. And the money out in Hawaii, right away, the Bureau of Engraving started to build, and I'll pass this around, right, started to engrave money for Hawaii, and I think they called in all the money as soon as they could and replaced it with that. Just pass that around. That is over printed Hawaii, and all the Hawaiian money was called in and reprinted and reissued because there was concern that we weren't going to be able to hold Hawaii. And they continued to print it that way until I think they felt safe in about 1943 to discontinue doing that. But those are really collectible bills today, especially in circulating condition, and they printed them in everything from 1s through 100s with that overprint. The other thing that happened was how it affects money. We were desperate for rubber, and rubber was the immediate problem because only rubber coming into the country at that time was on the ships from Southeast Asia headed here, and we didn't have a great deal of extra rubber in this country, and they're going to have to start building a lot of equipment that requires rubber. So in, let's see, well, first of all, they declared a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. Anybody remember the speed limit?
Oh, yes.
Reasonable poppers, whatever.
Yeah, well, that's after the war, but it was 35 miles an hour in the war, and it was to keep rubber from wearing out your tires, and many cars were just jacked up because they didn't have enough rubber. Well, eventually, of course, we started to get rubber out of South America, but it was a problem. It was a problem all during the war. Gasoline really wasn't the problem. Gasoline became rationed, but it was rubber that was the real problem. And you had to take your car in, and they recorded the serial numbers on your tires. And you better not get caught driving any other tires. You could lose your gasoline permit. And immediately there were special taxes applied. Well, I want to go back to a little bit of the rubber. They had a scrap drive, and that was done from June 15th to 30th in 42. And they collected approximately 450,000 tons of rubber throughout the country. And it was not quality rubber. It was old rubber, and it didn't do a great deal to help alleviate the situation. But that was really a tough thing, was the rubber situation. Now, the other thing that it affects in the money situation was we were desperate for brass, copper, and nickel. And so the coinage was changed. As late as 43, they took the silver out of the nickels, or they put silver in nickels and took the nickel out of nickels, and there's the wartime nickels. And you could tell those because they had a mint mark on them. And we were so desperate that we were taking the nickel out of the nickel coins and getting a different composition. Also, by the time I was 12 years old, I made my first trip to Des Moines, and I had an uncle that worked over in the State House, and he took me down to show me the tunnels in the State House that exist underneath, going over the old historical building and down, and now they go down to the Lucas building and so on. But in the tunnel was a Gatling gun. And I'm an old farm boy, and I thought, boy, that'd be great to take that Gatling gun over. They aren't using it. I'd like to have that out the farm. What I was gonna do with it, I don't know. But in later years, I discovered the reason that Gatling gun was in the tunnel was that Jack Musgrave, the curator, was hiding it down there. He was afraid that they were going to come and take some of the artifacts out of the historical building and melt them down because they needed brass, and it was actually in hiding down in that tunnel. In fact, they were so desperate that they went to Old Ironsides, the USS Constitution, took the cannon off the Constitution and melted it down, and we lost that. So you can see it's pretty desperate. Now, I don't know much about and don't remember blackouts, but we did have, before long, we had blackouts. And as soon as Pearl Harbor, as we declared war on Pearl Harbor, within 3 days, Hitler declared war on the United States. Van Ribbentrop wanted him to hold off because he felt they had their hands full with Russia and they didn't want to be, he didn't want fighting with us, but Hitler was adamant, so they declared war. So now we've got a two-front war to fight, although we were really kind of in it at that time. Now the blackouts, we hadn't learned our lesson there because we were shutting down the lights in New York and many of those coastal cities, and our tankers were silhouetted against those cities, and the Germans were picking them off. During the day, you could see burning tankers simply because they could see them so well at night out there on the ocean. And so we started learning our lesson there, and we had blackouts. I don't remember too much about them. You know, anybody here remember blackouts during the war? I don't. We must have had some. Must have had some here in the. Now there were appointed wardens, civil defense wardens, and Urbandale had some, and it was the first time that women were being appointed to these offices. And my cousin, in the same cousin whose father had written a check to her to the president, to her for a bond, and to the president, also had, what was I talking about? I was talking about blackouts.
Women.
The
Yeah,
wardens.
women.
Oh, women. Oh, yes, women in the war. She had a certificate that had appointed an aunt to a civil defense job in this town. And they they didn't have the proper certificate to appoint a woman. They had to mark out him and put in her. It's penciled in. And so women are coming to their own on the war front. But I thought that was amusing. Now, in addition to having to your tires rationed, you had rationing of gasoline, and your sticker. You had stickers on your car. They immediately started having a special $5 war tax on all automobiles, and the first ones were sold in June of 42. Yes, June of 42, and they were $2.09. Now the $5, it was $5 divided by 12, and if you traded cars, you had to buy one of these stickers and put on there. It was a federal war tax, and they're very, very difficult to find because cars were thrown away. There were 12 of them for every year of different denominations, and it's just about impossible to put a collection together. The other thing was, of course, metal. And license plates went. They took the 41 plates off of your car, and you got 42s because they were already ready, and you were supposed to take your car to the county seat, take your 41 plate off, donate it to the scrap drive, and put the 42s on. Well, that didn't work out very well. They had to back off of that because the people didn't have the gas to drive in, and they're trying to reserve tires, so it's kind of working against each other. Everybody had to drive to the, and that didn't work. But they got some license plates from 41, they got the 42s on. But there were no more license plates during the war. And instead, you got a sticker that you put on. This was your sticker put in your windshield, Iowa 43, and there's Iowa 44. And then in 45, there was another strip that was used as a license. And as late as 1946, they finally decided, now the Office of Price Administration controlled all prices. And that went into effect before the war, slightly before the war. And it was to avoid inflation. Now, we were in a depression, and yet Roosevelt felt we were starting to get into a situation where we might get into inflation, and had got Congress to appoint, or to bring on the Office of Price Administration. And that controlled the prices of automobiles, and everything except grain and commodities was controlled by the OPA. So when a new car was manufactured, there was a certain price on that car, and they could not charge more than, the dealer could not get more than that price for the OPA price. Now, of course, if they sold anything above that price, it was black marketing, and there was some of that went on. Now, gasoline, we lived on a farm, and I was driving to school with an A book on the windshield. And the A book gave you 4 gallons of gas a week. Well, I'm driving 18 miles a day to school, and my father says, you know, nobody can do that 5 days a week. People got to know that you're using tractor gas or cheating on the gas. And so he was able to go to the ration board and tell him he had this great need for his son to drive the car, and he got a B book, which gave us 12 gallons a week, made it look better. But farmers were faring pretty well if they didn't stretch it too far as far as gasoline was concerned, but nevertheless you were wearing out tires. Now, in addition to the problems with money and I'm gonna pass these around, Bertie, you can open and just pass around, everybody gets one, take one out, take a look at it. Even copper cents they didn't have enough copper to make the cents, and they were desperate, and they started to strike them. Everybody gets one of those, they're handouts. Those are steel cents of 1943, and they were very unsuccessful. They struck them, and they damaged the dies, they rusted right away, they just were kind of a mess. Yeah, most of them you pull out of there are probably pretty corroded and so on. They didn't hold up at all.
Yes, I remember this.
So the government by this time, after 43, 44, they had quite a few shell casings. And they decided to continue making them out of shell casings, and we only had those steel cents for 1 year. Now, anybody know anything about the mail? How did we write to people overseas, our people in the service?
Well, I was a little girl at that time, but I think I remember more than a lot of people my age, because I had 2 older brothers that were the perfect age to go in. One ended up in the European theater, and he was in the Belgian Bulge, and he had married my school teacher. and he was in the Signal Corps, and the only thing that he got out of the building that they were in was her picture. My other brother was sent to the South Pacific. He did come home, fortunately. Neither one of them were injured, but he came home skinny as a rail. He could eat very little because he had had so little to eat. He also got malaria, but the doctor
Now, he was
came.
in the South Pacific.
He was in the South. The doctor came to the house and gave him quinine pills, and he did get over it. But, let's see, where did I start off with?
Well, we were talking, I was asking you
How
about
did you write to them?
communication.
Yes.
Pen, paper?
Yes.
Yeah.
These very, very thin envelopes with the paper and the envelope. And we had this lady that was a postmaster in this little town, and every time we got a letter from one of them, she would ask me the next day, did you hear from Leo or did you hear from Lloyd? And I always wanted to say, no, we didn't. But I knew that she saw the letter that we get.
Yeah.
I do remember one time, Leo, who was in the European theater, we got this letter and here was something cut out.
Yes.
Right out of the sheet.
Yeah.
So that's the way they censored it.
Here's what they got. It
And
was
I do
called
have
female.
one of those, I do have one of those
Yeah.
letters. We
Now, I
had
have somewhere, I have some of the original female that we wrote on, and it was a sheet this size
Go get them.
that we wrote on. And it may have been very light paper, I don't remember that, but you wrote on that, and you mailed it to an address, an APO address, and then it was microfilmed to that.
Oh.
And that's what the recipient got, was, and you could send rolls and rolls of this microfilm rather than bags and bags of mail. And you're right, did you think something was cut out of the letter?
Yes, I'm sure it was
Really?
censored out.
I knew
yeah.
that the censors sometimes marked out,
But
I
this
didn't know
one
that they
was
ever cut it.
out. Mhm. And
but
I
all
have-
the stuff was.
I have the letter.
Yeah.
Carol and I were going to bring some things, thought of it this afternoon, did not go and get them gathered up, and thought of it when I got up here. But we both have our ration books.
Yes, and I had a ration book and I didn't bring it tonight, I don't know what happened to it.
The troops were pretty,
That was the other
crafty.
thing, was issuing ration books. Now, ration books were issued, let's see, they announced rationing on the 27th, not very long after, only 20 days there, they're going to be rationing. And on the 5th of January, they started rationing. Now, they printed, the OPA had 123 million ration books printed, and that was ration book number 1. I am not sure, and I had some discussion with someone today about that, whether, Pat, was it you, I think we discussed that.
I had some reference to the ration books in these articles that I've got.
Mhm.
That's how we were talking
Whether you
about it.
received, whether a family received one book or whether they received multiple books. But
Everybody got a book.
Each person had a book,
did they?
yeah.
Well, there were, and I do know that people, when they had a new child, immediately went and wanted to get the ration book, okay? But they, certain stamps were declared good for a certain period of time, and you could tear them out and get those commodities during that time. Now, stamps were hard to handle, and in 43, and here's something else you can pass out, each when you take one of those. There, I want to get rid of some of this stuff. Those are ration tokens. It happens that those are red tokens, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. And those are the ones that were used for meat. Now, I don't know just how they issued those, whether grocers were signed out a certain number of those and they could use them in the place of stamps. I don't know how those are distributed, but
But I didn't do the shop.
I went to a seminar in Chicago. There is a large fraternity of ration book and ration token collectors. And this man worked in the plant where they made those ration tokens in Cincinnati. And you'll notice there's some tiny letters on that. Can anyone see what those letters are? They're all the same because they,
One?
well, it says there's
Oh, the print.
two letters.
OPA.
Well, that's OPA ration. And right down there, there's two TU or something, they're all the same.
There's an R, E,
Oh,
O. I think their name.
well, anyway, there's two letters there. Let me see what it is. Yeah, I can't see it either.
Red point?
Oh, here, yeah, on the front where it says red point, beside that one,
Oh,
there's
on-
two letters.
Yeah, on each side of the one.
Yeah, what is that, Y something?
I can't read it.
I think it's YH,
Y, or YB.
maybe YB. Now, nobody seems to know what those letters were for. Now, there were like 27 of different letter series of those, and there were 32, I believe, of the blues. Now, this man that talked had worked in that plant, and he said it was just like a mint. And there was like a $10,000 fine for taking one of those out. And he went home one day and he found in the cuff of his pants two of them, and he just about fainted because he said he would have gone to federal prison if he'd have been caught going out of the mint, so to speak, with those ration tokens in his, and after the war, they were just junk. Now, the rarest of them is the blue MV. I have a full set of blues, and I wouldn't pay $50 for an MV. And it kept going, and then I wouldn't pay $100 for an MV. And finally, I bought an MV and it cost me $200. And today, they're about $400. But they are scarce ration token. Now, there are others that have some scarcity, but not like the MV. But those things after the war, people threw them in the collection plate at church. But he said, yeah, I just about fainted. Another thing about tires, going back to tires, when you got new tires, your name got in the paper. If you got a new tire, your name was printed in the paper, so your neighbors knew it, and you weren't out burning rubber. So, the scrap drives, who took part in scrap drives? Okay. What kind of scrap did you get?
Anything we could get our hands on.
Did you go for rubber too, rubber and,
The rubber, we usually kept those for a gas car. Even if they had a hole in it, we just put a boot in them and drove them anyway.
Aluminum.
aluminum?
Yeah, cans.
They have I get an antique collector magazine. It's actually all kinds of farm equipment. And in that, 2 months ago, they had a picture of, they always have mystery tools. And I was able to identify this mystery tool that I know went to the scrap drive. It was a icy ball, and it was Crosley's first attempt at refrigeration. It was a large aluminum ball here with a pipe that came up across like this, down to a smaller ball, which had a place for an ice tray in it. And it sat, there was a notch, and it sat in a big insulated box about this square. And you put heat or hot water on this ball out here, and that would cause the other one to get cool. And maybe some of you remember that Kelvinator and I think International made refrigerators that were gas operated refrigerators or kerosene operated. Kerosene, yeah. And it operated on the same thing. And I was able to identify that, and I think that probably the paper will be coming out in a couple of days, and I'm just wondering how many other people identified that as what they call the icy ball. And I know exactly what happened to that when the scrap drive came. They were desperate for aluminum, and Mom was glad to get rid of it. And I remember her working one day to make one little tray of ice cream by putting buckets of hot water on that thing all day, and you got a little bit of ice cream. And what a wondrous thing, but we didn't have electricity, so it worked. Now, before the war was over, they had issued 4 different ration books. Number 4 was the last one, and number 5 was printed, and it's much sought after by collectors. I've never seen one, but it was not distributed. It was printed but never distributed, and rationing was over. Sugar was about the last thing to remain on the ration list, and it stayed on until about 1947. Sugar was rationed before they released it. Another thing that the OPA, when they came with the 1946 license plates, Calhoun County got their plates. And of course, I've collected license plates and I've read a lot about them. And Calhoun County, the OPA, for some reason, had got the message to Calhoun County, you're not going to be able to have 2 plates, and yet they had made 2 plates for all of Iowa. All these counties must have been issued 2 plates, and Calhoun County was going through them, pulling all of 1 plate out and returning them for the scrap drive. And I've read every other county that year, and I can't find anybody that had to do that. But they were going through at one time and pulling these plates. Well, if one county had to do it, surely all of them, but I can't find anything else except Calhoun County. The OPA picked on it and said, you can't have 2 plates on the car that year. That's a mystery. So there we were, scrap drives, driving 35 miles an hour, cars jacked up. The ration books had different values, and then there was a C book. Ministers and doctors got C books. Congressmen all got a C book, of course. They were almost unlimited. Of course, every congressman had one. Now, Virginia, you wanted to talk about one of our persons who went to the service during the war. And because if you graduated from high school, you just about knew you were going to the Army, or you're going to be in the service.
First of all, Bob, would you like me to turn around your display?
Oh, yes, I did, yeah. Yeah, let's turn that around. This was, yeah, I forgot that. We had a lot of these. This is a reproduction. But everywhere were these signs and about scrap, loose lips sink ships. There's one. Smack the Japs, volunteer for the submarine service. So, who were we after in Europe? Who did we want to get?
Germans?
No, we wanted to get Hitler. We wanted to get Hitler. But because of the sneak attack, we wanted to get the Japs in we wanted to get the Japs. It was different. We weren't gonna, in the First World War, I guess they talked about the Huns, but we didn't get as personal with the individual soldier in Europe as we did with the soldier in Asia. But it was get the Japs. But there were all kinds of those around, and they were, mostly they were propaganda folders and that type of thing. Now, I'm gonna open it up to, somebody's got some other comments about mail and so on. What do you remember about the war? What sticks in your mind?
Well, my father was in the South Pacific in the Solomons, and the comment about the censors, and the thing that, and I've heard this from others, that the troops were pretty crafty at working around the censors. And he was with the Seabees, and they were, they had his codes, it was Lions 1 or Lions 4 or something like that. That was their base. It would never reveal where they were, on Island X or Island 10 or something. And he wanted to send to his mom where he was. And it happened to be one of the feast days, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but that was the island that he was on. And so he made reference to the feast day. Didn't ever use the name, just said, that I'm praying to, the feast on today and then today's date. And that was his code to tell them this was the island that I was on. And that's the only way I've ever been able to pinpoint a specific island on a specific date of where he was. So they were pretty crafty at doing those types of things.
It's interesting that you should do that, because I had an uncle who was a veterinarian, and he ended up in India. And he had an uncle that had spent his life as a missionary in India. And somehow he sent a message that he'd sure like to see Uncle Hugh again. That was his continuing message. And they do, he's in India because he's talking about Uncle Hugh. And that's how he got the message of where he was. So those things happened. And of course, Roosevelt never lived to see the end of the war. He died before it was over, and Truman finally was able to, we introduced the atomic bomb, and we thought this will end wars forever. Well, we found out something else there. Virginia, you want to talk a little bit about our
I've got so much I want to
Read.
share.
go ahead.
Will, does anybody else have the show and tell thing?
I might say one thing. My brother Lloyd, who was in the South Pacific, was in Australia, and he met one of his classmates. And they were going to meet that night, or the next night, but Lloyd was not there. He had gotten shipped out. And then, ironically, they met again in New Guinea, which, when you think of a little bitty town in Elston, Iowa, about as far south as you can get, of meeting someone in two places in World War II was really unusual.
I think that was more common than we think it was.
Really?
The reason I say that is because my dad was coming off of one of those landing craft, and he was sitting on a bulldozer with the guy operating it. And so they're coming into this island, and standing in the tree row were these two Marines. So as soon as they pulled in, one of the Marines says, "Well, hi, Tommy." So here were three guys from Terre Haute, Indiana, out in the middle of the Solomons, and the two Marines that were buddies growing up together, they knew, that they were in the vicinity. They didn't know they were on the same island. So they had found each other earlier that day or the day before. And then here comes my dad. And these were three guys that had grown up together.
But they hadn't enlisted at the same
No,
time.
well, the two Marines had, and then Dad about the same time, but the Marines went two ways and Dad went to the Navy another way. So I have a feeling that was probably more common than we like to think.
Well.
But you do wonder, think about the chances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
I had heard about that earlier, but then later I went and talked to Mary and now cause my brother had died. Exactly how did this happen, so he told me all about it. And I just thought, a little bitty place from Elston, Iowa, and to meet in Australia and then in New Guinea had to be really ironic.
There's all kinds of interesting things like that. I had a Navy chief that told me that he was in one of those islands and they thought they had it pretty well cleaned up. And he had gotten off of the ship and gone in, and he kind of wanted to look around, he wanted to go sightseeing. And he went out someplace without a helmet, wandered out of the camp, and by himself. And suddenly he heard someone shout his name saying, John, whatever, and I can't remember McCarty or whatever it was, go back. And he looked up and here's a Japanese sniper up in a tree. And he says, go back. He says, and he said, I'm going. You know my name? He said, yes. I went to school with you in Los Angeles. And he said he went back to the camp and a bunch of them rushed out there, but he said the sniper was gone too. He decided it was time to leave. So,
You were talking about scrap, and my mother told me something, I always thought it was just a joke because she wanted to be conservative, but we were always taught when we used the roll of toothpaste that you rolled it up from the bottom to squeeze everything out to get the last bit. But she said the reason that they did that was when they went to buy another tube of toothpaste during the war, you had to turn in your used one for scrap metal.
right.
Before the clerk would sell you a new
And the
one.
patriotic thing was to buy tooth powder, which came in a wooden box. And instead, so you didn't use metal for those tubes.
So it actually was true that you
Yes.
turned in the.
Yeah, you turned in the tubes. Yep, wow, I'm glad you mentioned that. You just can't imagine some of the things that, yeah. And saving, everybody was saving grease, and it was used for munitions. I don't know where'd they take that
Tin
grease?
foil off of gum.
Yeah, tin foil off of gum.
Well, there was something about hosiery.
Oh, yes.
Nylon.
Yes.
Nylons, because I
You could get
remember my
nylons.
mother, you know, being
Yeah.
very careful and.
And women painted their legs and tried to paint seams.
Yeah, gravy browning.
Yeah,
They would
right.
paint like a sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another thing they wanted real bad during the war, and that was milkweed pods.
Yes,
I
We-
remember
we-
getting
We
that.
gathered those by the
I forgot
sackful.
that. They made flotation devices out of milkweed, pod material, kapon.
The railroads would plant hemp on
Yes.
the right-of-ways
For rope.
for the rope. And
They planted a full field of that right across the road from us.
There were several hemp plants.
yeah,
In fact, at Hampton, just north of our son-in-law's, the old hemp plant, and I think there was one at Algona too. And they made rope in the hemp plants here in Iowa.
So did anybody try smoking it back then?
I suppose, but we'd heard that there's a weed down there that set you crazy if you smoked it. It was, Virginia,
Yep,
we'll give you a little bit of time.
I know, I'm gonna,
I know you got a lot to say.
I'm going to move Frank.
Okay, move
back
Frank.
now. And this is a very handsome, I'm not sure how old he was.
This, by the way, this came out of the same house of the lady that I said whose father wrote the check to the President of the United States. This was in her belongings, and I handled the sale of that and got away from her.
You gonna stay there then?
No, I'll move,
I don't care, but I just didn't wanna put stuff in front of us.
Oh, you're right.
Oh, you'll never get out.
I do have a back camera to look at this.
Good. I may still be in it.
Well, I got excited when one of our members donated, I think it was Mary something with Joel, but her friend donated a lot of things. And part of it were copies of the Blue Jay Chatter. And of course, local people are familiar with that it was the school paper, and it was put out once a month. And it was a true school paper in that it covered things from the grade school on up, and then although it was published by the school, the superintendent and so forth, they did include things of community interest. And so in looking through the copies that were donated and over these 4 years, it was just fascinating because again, to visualize you were a school child or a parent, and this was what was going on as far as from the school point of view or the community point of view. This particular issue is before the war actually started, but you can see the Glenn McDowell, our famous alumni, joins the U.S. Marines. And not only then was it the headline, but then this was how it was described. One of the school's outstanding athletes, Glenn McDowell, senior 1941, recently made application and was accepted as a volunteer recruit in the U.S. Marine Corps. Glenn left for the West Coast together with a few other Des Moines boys on November 5th and is stationed at the Marine Barracks at San Diego, California. McDowell will be especially missed in our high school, as he was an all-around athlete, having won letters in both football and basketball each of the 3 years he attended at the high school. Had he remained in school during his current year, he would have been one of Coach Perkins' stellar guards on the basketball team. His performance as one of the backs on the football team this fall was outstanding. As a tribute to his popularity in school, a special chapel was held in his honor on the afternoon of November 5th, at which time the senior class made him a gift of a beautiful Schaefer fountain pen, while the members of the football squad presented him with a cowhide billfold. The Urbandale High School student body feels that their school has made a splendid contribution to the nation's defense as Glenn takes up his work for the next 4 years in one of the toughest branches of Uncle Sam's Army. And of course, later on, we know how he became so famous. And so Glenn then answered back after he had been in service for a few days. Dear classmates, here it is a little over a week in the United States Marines and over 2,000 miles from good old Urbandale High. I arrived at the Marine Corps base about 11 p.m. Thursday, where we were greeted by one of the Marine police who escorted us to the haircut depot where we were put up for the night. The next 3 days were very dull as we were in the barracks, lingering around doing little as possible, although we were given a permanent haircut and a few shots in the arm during this time. On Monday, we were issued our clothing and assigned to our platoon instructors. A platoon is made up of 64 men. We are now what you call in boot camp, where you remain for 7 weeks. The first 3 weeks spent during the next three on the rifle range, the 7th week in the finishing up touches from where you are ready to be transferred to some foreign country or one of the recruit stations in the United States. I am hoping to be transferred to China or back to Des Moines to the recruiting station. The food is excellent, and I sure do eat my share, have put on some weight already. Lester, one of the friends, I don't know whether you would like the Marines or not. You have to shave every day, and I know how you like to shave. Signing off, wishing the class the best of luck throughout the remaining of the year. Your faithful classmate, Private Glenn McDowell. P.S. I ran out of ink for that wonderful fountain pen. And we'll hear more about him later on. Okay, several of the things that happened during the time period. Let's see. there was work that was done in the school, and then we also have some mention of ads. Here's something that happened in February 42. The grade students give up Valentines. Every year previous to 1942, there has been a Valentine box in each room in the grade school. But this year, on February 14th, there was not a Valentine box in the school. A few weeks before, the students had decided to give up Valentines and to give the money which they would have spent for them and as much more as they could afford to the Red Cross. Here are the results of their donations. The Pretty First gave $2.78. Miss Fisher, first grade, $3.25, and then it goes on and tells each one. The high school gave $3.99. Teachers, $14.10. So a total of $54.43. You mentioned about the civil defense. The Civilian Defense School meeting at the school gymnasium every Thursday and Friday nights is progressing quite well. The class now has a total enrollment of 50 men. Most of the men have 20 hours of training toward the requirements of auxiliary policemen. Judge Ladd talked to the class in February. The men have received some valuable hints on fingerprinting. Mr. Hutchins, Roosevelt High School instructor, is the instructor, and all men are urged to attend these meetings. Let's see, on this one. Sugar rationing dates. This is April of 1942. Sugar rationing dates, May 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th in the high school gymnasium. All heads of families living within the Urbandale area, which roughly comprises the Urbandale School District, are requested to report to the Urbandale Gymnasium on any one of the dates of May to register for the sugar rationing program. This is mandatory. The act passed by Congress provides that no person may purchase sugar for home consumption without first being registered as a consumer of that commodity. It is recommended by the local rationing board, of which C. Vandenberg of West Des Moines is chairman, that either the father or the mother of the family act as the responsible registrant for the entire family. The school site administrator is Mr. Roseman, local superintendent. School will not be dismissed locally, as will be the practice in some of the school districts. Assistance will be available from other sources than the local faculty. A preliminary survey made by the Urbandale PTA shows that more than 400 families will register on the above date.
Virginia, excuse me on that sugar rationing thing. The town that WWII came from, Buck Grove over in Western Iowa, not sure, in Audubon County. But anyway, there was a man there that always seemed to have sugar. But he occasionally got a load of corn, and he had a grocery store, but he also had a farm. And it seemed that there was a truck would come by, a straight truck, with a load of corn. But when the truck stopped at night, they parked behind the store, the bottom of that truck was, he opened it up and it was full of sacks of sugar. And where that came from, but it seemed like there was where a lot of sugar came from. Obviously, black market sugar. And people got sugar there, and I remember my father going one time toward the end of the war looking for farm equipment. You had to get that through the ration board, and he definitely we needed a mower, and he couldn't get a tractor mower. And we heard that there was a mower someplace in a neighboring township, and we went out there, and there were about 3 brand new mowers in the weeds. And my dad ended up buying one of those mowers. Now, I don't know who he paid, but it's a black market mower. And that was going on. and where that person got 4 mowers from John Deere.
We, of course, are familiar with the poppies, and here, Poppy Day, dimes, quarters, and dollars dropped into the coin boxes of the Poppy Girls this year that will aid the victims of the present war as well as those of the First World War, according to Mrs. Alvin Bird, Poppy Day Chairman of the Urbandale Unit of the American Legion Auxiliary. The auxiliary is rapidly completing arrangements for the annual observance of Poppy Day, when memorial poppies will be distributed throughout the city by auxiliary members. A large corps of volunteers is being formed under Mrs. Bird's leadership to work the entire day, bringing the flowers of patriotic remembrance to everyone in the city. This year, said Mrs. Bird, the poppy not only honors and aids the men who defended America 24 years ago and their families, but also those defending America today and their families. Funds collected on Poppy Day will be used in the work the Legion and Auxiliary are doing for the disabled of both wars and for needy families of men in the service as well as those of veterans. And the Urbandale School observes Army Day. Urbandale School enjoyed a half holiday Monday, April 4th. The occasion was Army Day, and many of the students wanted to see the parade in honor of that day. Now, I don't know what an estimated crowd of 75,000 watched the parade of 1,300 soldiers, 172 units of motorized equipment, and thousands of civilians. Nationally celebrated Armor Day was made an occasion in Des Moines, as elsewhere, for the sale of war savings bonds and stamps.
Okay, I not heard of that, but that reminds me of another thing about the sale of war bonds and stamps. When you were in high school, do you remember stamp sales on Friday?
Yeah.
And bond sales on Friday? Competition between the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior classes to buy, and there was a flag or something that went with that, and the class that purchased the most stamps that day got the flag for that week. And of course, we were always concerned because some kid would have a father that wanted to buy some bonds, and he'd want to buy, you know, $500 worth of bonds, and he'd give Junior the money to come in, and that would throw their class over that week. But that was for pretty good competition and sold bonds.
Not only did they give up the Valentines, but here's a new custom. Even if we don't graduate next year, we have our rings and pins anyway, might be a sentence uttered by a junior. This year, the juniors purchased their rings and pins instead of waiting until the senior year due to the impending shortage of materials used in jewelry manufacturing. The pattern chosen was the candlelight crest, each in choosing their own desired color, so thinking ahead on that part. Let's see, under the, okay, this was about the sugar register. Under the auspices of the mothers of the Urbandale PTA and Superintendent W.F. Roseman, the sugar rationing program was conducted in the high school on May 7th. There were 1,409 applications made for the sugar ration books and 1,349 books issued to the applicants. The difference between the two figures represented the number of citizens who had more than the minimum of 6 pounds per person in the family at the time of applying for their books. The school is especially indebted to the ladies of the local PTA who so generously gave of their time in assisting in the registration, and then it gives the names of.
What is the date of that, Virginia?
This one is May 1942.
Okay, this is when the teachers were called upon to give out the ration books, the sugar ration books. And it was a good plan because there were teachers everywhere in every state in the union. So you went to the school to get your ration book. Virginia,
Yeah.
why don't you finish up with McDowell? We've had him for a little over an hour now.
Okay,
And
I'm
tell
just
what
getting
happened.
to him.
Yeah, let's get that, wrap
Okay,
that one up.
this is May 1942. Glenn McDowell reported missing. Mrs. David McDowell received the following message on May 10th from the Commandant Lieutenant General of the U.S. Marine Corps. The Commandant regrets to advise you that according to the records of the headquarters, your son, Private First Class Glenn McDowell, U.S. Marine Corps, was performing his duty in the service of his country in the Manila Bay area when that station capitulated. He will be carried on the records of this Marine Corps as missing, pending further information. No report of his death has been received, and he may be a prisoner of war. It will probably be several months before definite official information can be expected concerning his status. Sincere sympathy is extended to you in your anxiety, and you are assured that any report received will be communicated to you promptly. And then Lieutenant General. And so this is May 1942. And then again, yes, we have things about the Christmas greetings. We have the listing of the people that were in service. And one thing that was interesting in the days now is that they were people were encouraged to give the addresses of their service people and encouraged to write to them. And then they had the copies of the Blue Jay Chatter were sent to them. Now, I don't know how they do that with a microfilm. And I think it was the American Legion, one of those paid the postage that would be so. So again, there's all kinds of interesting things. Here was patriotic program in February, and it listed the high school boys in service, and then it says, what your war savings stamps and bonds are buying. And it says 11 25-cent stamps buy one steel helmet, 1 25-cent stamps buy feed for one carrier pigeon. 106 war bond, $18.75 war bonds will pay for one liaison plane, L4A liaison plane. 4 1875 war bonds will pay for one Gironde rifle. 6 25-cent stamps will pay for one hand grenade. 1 25-cent stamp buys one film for an aerial photograph. 3 10-cent stamps will pay for 2 sandbags. 27 25-cent stamps will pay for one blanket. 37 25-cent stamps will pay for one gas mask. And 2 25-cent stamps will pay for gas for one self-inflating life jacket.
What happened then to McDowell, though?
Well,
Do you have information on
yeah,
that?
that's-
I want to get this wrapped up.
I know, I'm sorry, okay. Then, this is the, let's see, the final one. Okay. This is the Blue Jay Chatter of March 1945. The Legion honors Urbandale Marine. The Urbandale American Legion honored Corporal Glenn McDowell's survival of the Japanese atrocities in the Philippines at a potluck supper and public reception on March 16th at Dixon Hall. After an enjoyable fellowship during the supper hour, a short program featuring McDowell's story of his experiences was presented. At the opening of the program, the Reverend Corman of the Urbandale Open Bible Church read Psalm and opened in prayer. This was followed by the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner and other numbers on the program, Your Grand Old Flag, and so forth. Special guests in attendance were then introduced by Mr. Roseman, who presided over the meeting. 6 young service folk who have attended Urbandale High School were present. These were flight officer and so forth and so on. And one Sergeant Ida McDivitt, member of the Marine Corps Women's Reserve. And I think that her stone is in the cemetery, and it was a kind of a question that Mary had about, was that really a woman? Because I think she's listed as being one of the commanders of the American Legion, and that, well, is it really a mistake? Was it really a woman?
No,
Well,
that was another lady.
oh, was that a different one?
Uh-huh.
Well, at least there was one. And so then Glenn tells his story, and of course we won't go into here because it's so long, but how he left home in 1940 and had little idea what would happen, then was in the Philippines, and then all kinds of things that he endured. But it's a wonderful story, but again, the aspect of this young high school athlete, so enamored, he wanted to join the service, and then of the period of the family of him being missing in action, but then he did return, and that's a whole process.
Well, I believe, though, that the fact is that he ended up in a trench someplace where they were drenching them with gasoline.
Yeah, Bob, as the war was ending, particularly in the Philippines, the Japanese, because of the way they had treated the soldiers, they didn't want any of the evidence left. And so their orders from the emperor, all the way down the chain of command, were to eliminate the prisoners. That way, there'd be no evidence. And so what they had done is they had instructed the prisoners, McDowell being one, to dig this big trench. And the impression they had was that it was either a slit trench for a latrine, or it was a trench that they would go into because they were being bombed by the Allied planes. So as they were digging this trench, then they brought a truck in, and they could see that underneath the tarp on the truck was a machine gun. And they also had these cans that the Japanese soldiers were bringing out that looked to be gasoline. So they ordered all of the prisoners into the trench. Glenn and a couple were at the far end of it. Then they just doused them with gasoline, set them on fire, and started shooting them. Well, the trench went up to a bluff. And McDowell and a couple of others, just with their hands, were clawing their way to extend the trench out to the bluff. Then they had, and I don't remember, with 40 feet, however many feet it was, then down to the beach and the surf. Well, you're going to get either shot or burnt, or take your chances. He and several others took their chances, went over the bluff onto the beach. He survived that, and I can't remember what happened, whether he then swam out to another island or what the deal was. But he did survive. He wrote a book. It's called Last Man Out. It's an excellent, but it talks from his high school days all the way through. And it's in the library. I have a copy. I think we might even have a copy here. So if you want more of the story for Glenn, that's what that is.
Isn't that horrible enough to stop us for tonight?
Well, I'd just like to end kind of like with a benediction in honor
Okay.
to our president.
Okay.
Well done, thou good and faithful servant. The high school pays tribute to Roosevelt. The high school joined the nation in paying their tribute to our late president Friday, April 13th. Mr. Roseman read the 91st Psalm, made a few remarks about the president, and read a tribute to him. The students then stood and pledged allegiance to the flag and stood silent for a moment in respect. And I think this is the tribute that, I didn't have his name here, but I think this is what he said. President Roosevelt is dead. This news was so recently shocked the nation has now become history. The man whom the people of America had 4 times elected to the highest office in the land has slipped out into eternity, a casualty of the world's greatest war. Many tributes have been written at the death of great men. Many tributes have been written at the death of this man, one of the greatest of great men. And yet we realize the futility of words. We realize the uselessness of mere sentences to convey the feeling of freedom-loving people at the death of this man, the champion of freedom. There are no racial, no religious, nor even political prejudices in America today. All are Americans, bereaving the death of the greatest American of our day. We mean to write no flowery eulogy. We cannot add to that which has been written. We only wish to add our feeble voice to the great voice of the American people, raised in sorrow at the death of our beloved president. The attitude of our hearts is perhaps best expressed in these words found over the gate of Arlington. We can now say, "Sleep well, soldier, your work is done." And I thought, what a different feeling about a president, but we haven't experienced anything like this since that time.
Okay.
Thank you.
And as I say, we have these copies, and then we also have copies of the Blue Jay Chatter, some that were donated in the 50s, but anytime you want to look at any of these, they make a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there I didn't know was available. I'm gonna be, yeah, Virginia Office.